People who joined the military later in life, what was the biggest difference between you and the 18-year-old soldiers? I joined at 22, which may not seem like a lot, but it was. Making the transition to the military can be difficult, but having to do so while also learning to live on your own for the first time in your life makes it a lot more difficult. I've had to teach guys how to do their laundry, purchase a car, etc. During my college years, I had gotten a lot of the stupid learning to adult mistakes out of the way, and by this time was way more goal-oriented than the typical 18-year-olds were. Because of this, I flew up the ranks a lot quicker. I was also able to see the bigger picture, which helps a lot when you're given some crap detail and everyone around you is bitching. My superiors thankfully caught on to my maturity early on, so I was treated a little better than some of the others. Funny side story, we had a guy that was 28 in my basic training flight who had to go to sick call. Every one of the supporting agencies in basic training are typically dongs to all the trainees. He goes down there. Medic, what are you doing down here, trainee? Trainee, I'm sick. Medic, how do you know you're sick? Are you a doctor? Trainee, I'm freaking 28 years old. I know when I'm freaking sick. Medic, roger that. Have a seat. I sit through the endless financial planning briefings wondering why they're wasting so much time with this crap, only to see the youngins buying brand new iPhones and cars a week after boot camp. Sarge, it's only 40% APR. I think the biggest difference outside of maturity is fitness level. It's amazing how much stronger a 25-30-year-old is compared to an 18-year-old. Can verify, I am an average build 6 foot tall male about 200 lbs. When I entered Navy boot camp at 17, I was 140 pounds. 4 years later when I got out, lots of food and exercise gave me normal size and strength. I'm 28 and just joined the Navy. Some things I saw in boot camp was the lack of the 18-20 years old to follow instructions. For some reason they never were able to comprehend when to shut up, and we got bare a lot for it. They always want to rush everything and never pay attention. There were also times where they got really homesick or Facebook sick. There were some kids that it was their first time flying, so they didn't know how to check in at the airport to get their boarding passes. Overall, they had trouble following simple directions and they thought they knew everything cause someone told me. I joined at 22, so not really later in life, but I was still one of the only guys in my basic training platoon that was over 18. But that 4-year age difference was enormous. For one, I had a college education, which made me sound different because of my vocabulary, etc. Not being judgy, just a fact. The younger guys busted my balls a lot for being a college boy. The guys who were just out of high school were amazed to learn they were allowed to use profanity without repercussion, so they used it excessively while basking in their newly found verbal freedom. But the biggest difference was how the younger guys seemed to have a fear of getting in trouble, because when you're a kid, trouble is one of the worst things that can happen to you. The older guys didn't think of it in this way. We just wanted to do the right thing so we could learn. For the record, I eventually went to Iraq as a platoon leader, and I was ultimately in charge of 27 guys and most of them were 19-20 years old. They were all outstanding soldiers. Age didn't seem to matter as much downrange. Context: went through army basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia in 2007. When you said they called you college boy, it reminded me of a story me dad told me when I was younger. He was working construction during the summers when he was in college. He was young, and one of older guys he worked with would call him KB. He never understood what it meant until he finally told my dad. It stands for college boy. Went through basic at 25, and my platoon had a fair amount of older guys mixed in with all the 18-year-old kids. Oldest was 32 or so. Many of these have probably already been mentioned, but these are my general observations. They don't know how to sit down and shut up for more than 30 seconds, even after repeated punishments. They freak out about little things, like freak out. Once our drill sergeant threatened to make our whole platoon repeat basic over something dumb, which wouldn't happen. It made some young guys cry or threaten to fail rather than really basic. The older ones weren't phased at all. Tend to get more homesick. Often it's their first time away from home. Seeing young guys cry because they missed home or their high school sweetheart was somewhat common. Speaking of it being their first time away from home, A lot of them can't do basic stuff like wash their own clothes. Had to teach a few younger guys how to address mail. It's a lost art, I guess. Poor money handling skills. The younger guys are much more likely to immediately blow their bank account at the end of basic. And just an overall lack of maturity and life experience. But that probably goes without saying. I went through my college years and finally grew up to join the military only to go through my college years all over again. There's no big difference really. They're younger and recover faster. I kept up with the best of them despite having a few years over them. Some are a lot more mature than we give them credit for while others are a lot less. I feel for those who miss home though. Can't be easy being that young and being so far away from everything in an intentionally hostile and stressful environment for months. So I can only speak to this a little bit as I was going into the military but was disqualified due to recruiter error. When I went to MEPS for the physical exam, I was floored because the first thing they did to everyone that was there at 5:30 AM was a breathalyzer and some young dumbasses actually failed it. This just blew my mind as the night before they really try to keep people on lockdown. I can't even imagine the lack of thought that goes into something like that. Unrelated, I was pulled over in what they call random breath testing at 10 AM one Sunday. I asked the cop why they were there at 10 AM and she said that's when most people get DUI. Moderation and self-control. Most 18-year-olds will drink just to get crap-faced and blackout drunk. Which, let's be honest, we all did it when it was the cool thing to do. But I and most people my age say nah, I've had 2 beers. That's enough for me. The draw to getting totally wrecked on Jack Daniels is really gone when you get older. Clubs and bars too. Joined the Marines when I was 22 and noticed the 18-year-old recruits geeked out over being a Marine while the older recruits and I had a little more utility to it. College, life choices, duty. This is a generalization of course, but it is what I noticed. Same. I turned 23 just after boot camp, and by the time I hit the fleet, I was the only one over 21 in our boot drop. I bought a lot of fricking booze. I joined the Navy at 18, but there was a dude in my boot camp division, called companies before and possibly after I served, who was 31. We called him Grandpa. His knees were shot. He had a hard time getting up out of bed in the morning. He was always last in a run. He is my prime motivator for watching what I eat and exercising regularly. Today I'm 36 and I am probably in better shape than I was at 18. At a minimum my diet is a crap of a lot better. That dude got roughed up and he never seemed to adjust to the exercise. Just more things would start popping when he'd move. I joined when I was 25. I was fine with the PT but maturity and life experience was the big part. They put a female in charge of us who had never left her hometown or been to an airport. I ended up talking her through it and she was all freaked out. I would have been too though. At tech school, it was just like college kids too young to drink going out and over drinking. Then coming back to the barracks and puking it all up. I was not nice enough to hold hair back. I just tried to talk to them about being smart. It didn't sink in. The hardest part was that my rank was that of 18-21-year-olds and I couldn't make friends with them. We were friendly, but I was past the keg party stage. Anyone I was interested in hanging out with was higher ranked enough that it would have been inappropriate. So I was lonely a lot. It can be very difficult to make civilian friends when you are working 12 hours a day. This was pretty much me when I joined. A lot of the other women said this was their first job. One even told me she had never done chores before this. 27 when I enlisted in the Corps, I was blown away how many of these kids didn't know how to tie a tie or how to properly address an envelope. Just simple stuff you'd assume everyone knows. They'd have the addressee and stamp locations all messed up. I was pretty much the old man in the platoon and it dawned on me I was the first adult to show them these skills. Definitely a different perspective. A friend joined up after a few years of failing at life, dropping out of college, getting fired from lots of fast food places and being mostly in a state of homeless. He witnessed a lot of alpha males get broken and cry for home, and being told they were home. Same with a big guy who had attempted to pick on him for size difference, cry for mama on a late night run and being told the drill sergeant was his mama. He didn't catch as much heck as the younger guys who still had a child's mentality. The entire platoon turned around over one incident where a guy cut himself shaving. He was punished severely and publicly for damaging government property. After that everyone got the message over their situation. The shaving bit is perfect. Enlisted Army Reserve at 34, graduated basic the day before the age limits would have DQ'd me. Every other branch and component had a cutoff age that excluded me. Us older guys got on point pretty quick, but I got to watch kids make the change and grow up in front of me. It was pretty impressive to see when they came to me for life advice, or when they broke ranks from the social order of things in order to make more mature decisions in life on their own. Also, the ability of the younger ones to absorb information is decidedly faster. On the other hand, I got to talk a lot of crap in PT. Old man strength, even for us short guys, 5'3", tends to make young, able-bodied kids half my age hang their heads in shame. You're not kidding. I'm 39 and still dust off 95% of the new airmen I have in a run. Maturity, social settings, and different way of life. Military versus civilian. I joined the Air Force when I was 27 back in 2015. Not too long ago, so I feel like it hasn't changed much. Maturity seemed apparent in boot camp because there were a lot of 18, 19, 20 somethings doing something like this for the first time. Past boot camp and into active Air Force you find yourself being judged a little for your age. Now 28, and only an E3, Airman First Class. All the other younger airmen find that a little odd. Luckily I'm easy to get along with, so people just look it over, but everyone else my age group were sergeants, and I was only junior enlisted. Of course some dumbasses who've been yelled at a lot who have seniority saw this as an opportunity to yell at an older guy and feel good. Being talked down to from a younger person was either frustrating or hilarious. Later if they fricked up in front me I wouldn't shove it in their faces only to see them shocked. The weird relation that we're the same rank but I'm so much more mature helps certain people out because I'm like an approachable older brother. Also, since I'm the same age as all the sergeants, they kind of look at you funny because they want to talk to you like an adult but you're just an airman. Some co's are generally really bothered by this because they've adapted to military life so much they get a little weirded out. Although other branches are way more guilty of this than AF. But it still exists. The last thing worth mentioning is the way of life. I was rather surprised for the first time when my supervisor at work told me I have a dental appointment. I replied thanks mom only to get this angry look. You'd be surprised just how much hand holding is done. It took me a bit to get used to, but they do everything for these kids. Medical in the military is a freaking breeze in comparison. For better and worse because some of the olden co's have no idea what a mortgage is for example and are homeowners. It's almost night and day for some things, but I don't regret joining older. Gave me a lot of perspective. I had an airman that was the same age as me, 27 at the time. I was a SSGT at the time. We had a few issues because he wanted to be treated like he was 27, but then would fall back on the I'm just a dumb airman shtick when it was convenient. I gave him the option of being treated like one or the other, but not both. He wised up and we ended up working great together. College degree, life experience, work ethic. I was actually older than one of my CCs. When I got out of boot camp, I went to A school and that is where the shenanigans really took place. Unlike boot camp, A school was more like a college setting. So many NJPs. I don't know these acronyms. I enlisted at 21 with 3 years of college under my belt. This may be a regional difference. I was surprised that half of the females in basic were either engaged or married. Another difference was that the younger privates were more willing to give up when they failed basic, over going to FTU or being recycled. Oh, and something else, you have different motivation. Just before a field X we were instructed we could pack our packs how we wanted, as long as our section had identical setups. So we had to come to some agreements and everyone had different ideas, but we got it squared away pretty easy until it came to our roll mats. The bulk of the guys wanted to put it inside their packs, but I wanted to put it on the outside, held down by the pack flap. This was simply because, as section sig, I had a freaking giant radio, spare battery, spare whip, radio bag etc all in my pack and it took up heaps of space and the roll mat simply wouldn't fit. So I stuck to my guns, desperate to have me conform. One of the fellas, who had been playing an alpha roll up till now, squares up with me and hits me with the most devastating threat he can manage. Bro, if you don't put your roll mat in your pack you won't look cool. I am well past the age of giving a frick how cool I look and to whom. Apparently it went over everyone's head that your PSG wouldn't give a frick that the RTO had a different configuration because he had a goddamn PRC-77/St. in his rack. I joined the army at 30. I had a degree in sociology but knew it was time for a change. At the time I was managing a photo lab and hated it. If I saw one more dang photo of babies or Disneyland, I was going to kill someone. My student loans were due and the army swore they would pay them off. Sorta a lie. They only pay the principal. And my girlfriend ran off with my best friend. I wasn't in love with the girlfriend but best friends are hard to come by. Took the ASVAB and joined the MI Corp. Served 20 years and now retired. Basic was relatively easy. Drill sergeants couldn't do anything to you that my mother hadn't already done. 8 wasn't too complicated. The hardest part was dealing with people 12 years younger than me every day. Until I was promoted to sergeant first class, I was older than most everyone. Patience is my watchword. Joined the Air Force at 24. At basic I would say the work ethic between those in their mid-late 20s was better since most of us had civilian jobs or careers before we joined. The younger guys seemed to complain about the most menial tasks a lot more. Also the older guys had a lot easier time coping with being away from home since I had lived on my own since I was 19. Same thing with the work ethic at tech school, but I will say my roommate was 38 and I had to teach him how to not pee on the toilet seat. He refused so I ended up having to drag him to the instructor for counseling. Being 21 plus was nice because they let us drink on the weekends. First base. Normally single low-ranking airmen are restricted to the dorms on base for a few years. Our dorms were full and due to my age and having lived on my own before our leadership let me move off base into whatever housing I could find immediately. Which is nice not having to deal with random room inspections and having the freedoms that come with not living in the dorms. Like being able to have people over after certain hours. Or getting the fire alarm pulled and loaded onto a bus for a mass drug test. What else? Because I'm older, but lower ranking, we still get to miss out on certain safety briefs while traveling. Even though most of my peers age-wise are E4 E5 I've noticed I tend to be treated more like an adult by leadership compared to my similar ranking. But younger peers also didn't finance a Mustang at 26% APR because I had established credit and if I need to can get very good rates. I also didn't have to marry a stripper to get out of the dorms which is nice. About the only downsides I've noticed is that you don't really fit in anywhere. Rank wise my peers are 17-20. Everyone my age is usually higher ranking and it might be seen as unprofessional to be seen as developing a friendship with higher ranking members. Being treated like a kid again at basic and tech school sucked. But that's temporary. I wouldn't mind being forced to live in the dorms too bad. I could have put up with that for 2 years. But I'm sure glad and lucky I was able to move out early. I also notice a lot of younger airmen tend to totally hate the Air Force. It's not so bad I think. Yeah, it's the military and you have to put up with their brand of suck. But for the most part my job is just like civilian jobs I've held. They feel like they've missed out on a lot in life watching their friends go off to college and party and travel. Overall I'm happy I waited until I was 24 to join. I probably would have hated it if I joined at 18 and had doubts. Sometimes I wish I joined at 18 because I could be getting out right now with my GI Bill and young to college. It is what it is. I feel like my decision to join was more solid because I started a career, decided it wasn't for me and was certain I wanted to do this. I was 26 when I joined. Not saying I never complained, but I did it more internally than most of the 18-year-olds I did basic training with. I joined at 23 as an officer, but I saw the most difference with the guys that went to the military college, joining around 17-18. When I joined up, my years doing stupid crap like getting high and S-faced every 2 days were long behind me. I was also done with high school clique stuff. Some of those graduates had basically spent their entire adult life in the military and that tends to skew perceptions and meant that they were in some ways much more mature than other 22 years old. Upon commissioning, having to command troops and be responsible for their well-being tends to do that. In other ways however, Some lack the perspective living a civilian life before joining gives you. For me it's very much a job, one which I greatly enjoy, but I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid of making it my entire life. I went in at 25, and my god, I hadn't realized just how stupid and out of touch, and plain old clueless my fellow trainees were. For Pete's sake, just shut up and do what you're told. It's not rocket science. I was 25 too. I did a lot of heavy sighing under my breath when the whining and bickering started. I refused to engage. Plus when I would notice the noise level slowly start to build from whispering, to murmuring, to talking louder, to shouting, I just sighed and got ready for what was coming next. Freaking idiots. I joined the Air Force at 24 and I had already been through college and had a BA. GPA was too low to get the officer route. We had a bunch of 18-19 year olds with me, but also a few guys in their later 20s and even early 30s. The difference I found was that the younger guys who were just out of high school tended to be more gung-ho even if they were reservists. Like, I had already been through some jobs and college and to me this was only 8 weeks of bulls. But so some of the 18-year-old trainees this was insanely important because it marked their entrance into their dream. It definitely led to us butting heads throughout our time there along with some other reasons. I was married, with a kid, used to paying bills and being on my own. I actually cared about what we studied in specialty school and paid attention. I did not blow my paycheck on getting drunk each weekend, or nightly, and saved for my family's future. Enlisted at 22, I wasn't the oldest in my flight. We had a guy who was 34, but I was on the tail end of the bell curve. It wasn't a huge difference. Younger guys seemed more nervous and afraid of getting in trouble, though paradoxically more likely to get into it. Most people my age or older just wanted to get through basic and get on with their careers. Younger guys acted like they were all the main characters in a movie about themselves. Our MTI, training instructor, would treat the older airmen like, well, adults after the first few weeks, which was nice. Outside of basic training, age isn't much of an issue. I've known guys still in their teens who carry themselves with a shocking level of maturity and dudes in their 30s who acted like they were on the spectrum. It's also interesting when you have 22-year-old officers in charge of 50-year-old chiefs. Though to be fair, the chiefs only let them think they're in charge, and the smart LTs know this. Some folks might judge a service member by their age, but the smart leaders will judge an individual only upon their ability to act like a professional and get their job done. Not that late, but I was 22 when I went to do my military service. Got out when I was 23. I was one of the only guys there who had a university degree and who otherwise worked a white-collar job. Most of the rest had just finished high school. Some even hadn't gone to high school. Not to blow my own horn, but when it came to any sort of slightly intellectual task or test, I was easily well above most of the rest. As I was put in an artillery unit, then I was given the most complex responsible job, which was calculating firing solutions and manning the radio in the command center, while as a lot of the younger, less educated guys were out there hauling artillery shells around. The age in and of itself wasn't much of a factor. It's not that big of a difference. It's more the education life experience that makes a difference. I went through MEPS for a dental school scholarship. I was 25. Not currently in military, but this was my experience. The biggest difference was how loud the 18-year-olds were. In the common space there was always something going on. No silence. At dinner the 18-year-olds did not understand table manners. Once again everything was loud and needed to be a show. Call time was 4:30 am for breakfast. I went to bed at 8 PM. Next door was a room of 4 18-year-olds. They probably did not fall asleep until 2 and was forced out of bed by a drill sergeant. The people applying for an officer position were punctual while the younger enlisted crowd showed up late. During MEPS, the younger people had troubles following basic commands. During the exercise portion, jokes were made and upset a number of the doctors. I joined user when I was 32. I was considered the grandma of the crew. I sucked at PT but never gave up. I didn't follow the younger enlistees' immature attitudes. I rarely cried. Did what I was told. Granted, didn't graduate with my basic unit due to PT failure. Missed my push-ups by 1 and sit-ups by a couple, and I was sent to fat camp. Was there for a week and passed the PT test quickly. PT still a struggle but will be getting out in February. Getting caught up in the drama of the younger soldiers. Sometimes I forget and have to step back, shake my head and remember I'm a decade older than them. Seeing some of them go through the crap I went through at 20 is tough. BC they're not going to take advice just like I wouldn't have. Also, realizing that lingo has changed dramatically. Not me because I enlisted when I was 17, but those guys ages 25-28 who were with us are generally calmer and collected. Never saw or heard those guys be about stuff. They were tougher and can preserve better than guys our age. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.